We have Tom Homan, who did an announcement earlier today saying that is going to be leaving. Uh, ICE is going to be leaving Minnesota. Okay, and I know, hello, Inga. I know I don't mean to challenge your worldview. Okay, I don't fully buy this. Right, I don't fully buy it, but uh, well, let's put it this way. I'm not sure how to view this. I have some ideas on it, but I'd really like to get your perspectives on it. All right. So we are going to watch Tom Homan's announcement. Okay. We are going to watch it together because I just want us to watch it together. I want us to see if we can read between the lines. Yeah, Lamira, right? Welcome, Lamira. We need to see if we can read between the lines here. So let's watch what he says, and then let's talk about the implications of them leaving Minnesota. Okay. All right. So let's hear what he has to say. All right. And remember, guys, he's a propagandist. His approach is tactical. So we've talked about this before. So let's see what he says and let's analyze.
Zero tolerance for misconduct. President Trump also deployed me here to work with state and local officials to de-escalate the intense, volatile reactions and conflicts that have unfolded on the streets here between federal law enforcement and unlawful agitators. While working to course correct and improve how enforcement operations are being run and executed here, and even before I was sent up here, I've been saying over and over that forcibly assaulting, resisting, opposing, impeding, intimidating, or interfering with a federal law enforcement officer.
So notice he started by talking about a lot of the conflict between protesters and ICE agents and how ICE agents made some mistakes, okay?
A crime in violation of USC 111. It's not okay. It will not be tolerated. Zero tolerance. If you cross that line.
Of course, right.
Put hands on an ICE
we will execute you without trial.
Officer. Not only is such activity unlawful, it is dangerous, and sadly we have seen tragic consequences, as well as adverse impacts on businesses and the communities here in the city.
There you go. Tragic impacts on businesses. That's probably what they're mainly concerned about.
While the Trump administration supports everyone's First Amendment right to freedom of speech and assembly and petition, it has to be done lawfully and peacefully. Because we will not tolerate unlawful actions committed by agitators who are just causing havoc. This is not the way to express your disagreement or try to reform federal laws. Go talk to your members of Congress if you want the laws changed in this country. Nor is doxing federal law enforcement personnel and their families. It's just not right. Enough is enough with this misguided, reckless, and shameful behavior. We don't want to see any more bloodshed. I don't want to see any more bloodshed. I pray every night for the safety of our law enforcement personnel and the safety of those in the community, whether you're here legally or illegally.
Okay, blah, 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 blah.
I don't want to see anybody harmed.
Sure.
If you break the law, we're going to arrest you.
Okay.
We have already arrested more than 200 people for violations of USC 111.
So I want him to get to the point where he says that they're leaving.
The U.S. Attorney's Office has already accepted many for prosecutions, and some are still pending. I have also received commitments from state and local law enforcement that they will respond if federal law enforcement is being impeded or assaulted. They will shut down unlawful agitator activity, including arresting agitators involved and seeing them follow through. And we're seeing them follow through on those commitments. We've seen this past weekend that the state and local law enforcement have taken action when it comes.
Yes. You know what? I'm going to speed it up, guys, because I want to get to the good part. But I do want you to hear him saying that he talks a lot about local law enforcement and how he has received promises that local law enforcement will take a lot of the actions, will do a lot of the work. Okay. So, all right.
It's the public safety. And bless him for doing that. Since I have been here, I've repeatedly emphasized that the unlawful and violent agitator activity is unacceptable and must wind down as a condition for further drawdown of law enforcement personnel. I cannot remove law enforcement personnel while violence poses serious risk to our officers. I will not leave my officers in that position. It is worth knowing that in all my meetings and discussions since I got here, I've not heard one federal, state, local law enforcement, or judicial official,
don't worry,
nor any member of the business or faith communities that I met with, say that ICE is an illegitimate agency that doesn't have a real mission. Quite the opposite. All I've heard is the acknowledgement that federal immigration laws passed by Congress do exist, and ICE has a legitimate responsibility to enforce those laws.
But guys, I know it might be boring to listen to this, but I do want you to hear everything he says. Notice what he's focusing on. It does kind of feel like he's doing justification for why they're withdrawing. He's like, "I wanna point out that, the violence is not what's making us leave, blah, 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 blah." It's weird. There's a lot of strange things that he's saying, and remember, he's choosing his words carefully, okay?
ICE is a legitimate federal law enforcement agency. We're not out scouring the streets to disappear people or deny people their civil rights or due process. In addition to taking public safety threats off the street, ICE here in this state have located 3,364 missing unaccompanied alien children. Children that the last administration
Right.
lost and weren't even looking for.
Okay, that's just not true. They're
That's
just
because-
kids that didn't show up to immigration hearings, right? That's not the same thing as them being missing. It means that they did not show up to immigration hearings, okay?
The leadership of President Trump, these children were located. As part of the de-escalation efforts, I have called on state and local officials these past few weeks to tone down the rhetoric and denounce unlawful activities being conducted by the agitators. We don't have to agree on everything, and we definitely do not. But we all agree that the lawlessness and chaos and disruption that is occurring on the street needs to end. I want to thank Governor Walz for his messages focusing on peace and his support for the Minnesota State Troopers to respond to unlawful situations that put federal officers and the public at risk. I also want to thank Mayor Fry for taking a public stance against agitators setting up barricades that block streets and endanger public safety, and for directing the police to take those roadblocks down.
Yeah, Drumfield.
Additionally, I want to thank Police Chief O'Hara, Sheriff Witt, and various other local law enforcement for their responsiveness and efforts to maintain law and order in the streets. We've seen a big change here in the last couple of weeks, and it's all good changes.
Okay, so notice now he's saying, well, in the last few weeks, the stuff has calmed down. Stuff has calmed down in the streets.
I'm also pleased to report that we're seeing a notable decrease on unlawful agitator activity here in Minneapolis and overall throughout the state. This is great news for Minnesota communities that have been adversely impacted by the lawlessness and chaos on the street. We have what we call here QRFs, Quick Response Force, security teams that get called out when ICE officers are out doing operations. They get into trouble if agitators get out of control. If there's a danger and public safety is at risk, these QRFs respond to help these officers get off the X and get out of that situation. I asked the day when I got here, I want to know what the QRFs call outs are, what their deployments are. I want to know every time a QRF is called out. The QRF deployments have dropped dramatically because we have less of that occurring, less of the agitator that crossed that line. That is a good thing. That is a win for everybody, not just for the safety of law enforcement officers. It's a win for this community.
It's a win for their image.
Success that has been made arresting public safety threats and other priorities since this search operation began.
Yeah.
As well as the unprecedented levels of coordination we have obtained from state officials and local law enforcement.
Yeah, Rudy, right?
President Trump has concurred.
Here we go.
That this search operation conclude.
Okay. So he just said it, okay? Very quickly he said it. By the way, President Trump and I have concurred that this surge operation should conclude. Now, we'll watch more of it, but that's the point I wanted you to hear. Notice he said right before that, let me go back a little bit here.
I have proposed, and President Trump has concurred, that this...
One second here.
With that, and success that has been made arresting public safety threats and other priorities since this search operation began, as well as the unprecedented levels of coordination we have obtained from state officials and local law enforcement, I have proposed, and President Trump has concurred, that this search operation conclude.
Okay. So, he said that they have obtained tons of support from local law enforcement and that they have been successful in their detainment of illegals. Now, yes, Inga, exactly. Now, here's the thing. So, Inga, this is where I'm not sure, Inga. I think you might be right. So Inga says taking the L without admitting defeat publicly. That is one possibility. I think that this is a PR move, right? I think they needed to make it appear, he needed to make it appear as if this wasn't a disaster. So he's trying to emphasize, no, we were successful and we're not leaving because of the intimidation. So, and that. Now, on the other hand, it's also possible that he's just shifting, he's lying, and that they're just shifting the burden of these enforcement actions to local officials, or they're going to do it more secretly, okay? And but he wants people to think that they're gone because he's trying to calm down the state, okay? I don't know. All I do know is that there's something not true about it, Okay? Like, it's weird. It's very possible, SoCal, that they are leaving because of the number of court losses they've suffered. I think it's an imagery thing. I think he waited for a little bit to do this drawdown because they didn't want to make it appear as though the pressure was getting overwhelming. That's one possibility. Um, excuse me, but I don't know. It also should be noted that even though he said that they've been having to call this unit out less to help protect ICE agents, that might be because there have been fewer ICE agents going out because they don't want to cause more problems, right? We don't know if it's actually true that there have been less incidents. It might just be that the ICE agents have been going out less often. So it's definitely there's something optical going on here, but I'm not quite sure what the underlying reality is. I suspect, though, based off how much he's rambling and how much he's defending it, that this is somewhat of a defeat. Okay. And that's a good thing. I do think that this is somewhat of a defeat for the administration. Now, what I do think is that it would be very beneficial. That's possible, Cody. It would be very beneficial if uh, this is painted as a success for the protesters in Minneapolis. Whether it's true or not, if the idea gets out there that this was a successful action by protesters in Minneapolis to push out the Trump administration, that will inspire people in other cities to do the same thing because they're like, oh, it works. Was it successful? I don't want to say that. I think optically, the government's mistakes made it somewhat successful in some ways, but it would be nice if we could paint it like a success at the very least. You see what I mean? So I'm thinking in a Machiavellian way here. I think protest groups should frame this as a victory, whether or not it is in fact a victory. Okay? Maybe. Uh, but what do you all think? It's interesting, and this only came out this morning, but they are withdrawing from Minneapolis. Okay? They are withdrawing from Minneapolis. Also, his tone conveys a little bit of disappointment, I think. He seems a bit frustrated. Um, I'm not sure what you guys think. What do you think? I saw some great comments in here. Okay. I'm pretty sure it's just lessening forces while still maintaining a presence. They're moving the bulk to other cities. Okay, that's fair. And it's very possible that it's just sort of a drawdown to make themselves less visible so that there's not as much negative pushback. Hello, virtual violence. Inga says they know that the public doesn't like ICE, and if they tried to go harder, it wouldn't spin well for them. Yeah, I think that that might be the case, Inga. I think that they didn't want to retreat right away for optical reasons. So they've waited till the protests have died down a little bit, but now they're retreating so that it doesn't seem like a defeat, or it doesn't seem like they've been pushed out. I do think that's possible. And I know we have a tendency, hello, Fetty Spaghetti. I know we have a tendency to be a bit pessimistic about these things, but overall, I think this is, at the very least, they've been forced to go underground with it, which still is bad. But okay, we will have to see what ends up happening in Minnesota. Now, admittedly, for example, ICE is now setting up in Ohio, partially, where I am. This could be that they're just sending these agents elsewhere. But this really, I don't know. But my initial thoughts, guys, are this reads as a defeat for them. It does. And it's definitely, they're trying to make it appear optically like it's not a defeat, but it does kind of look like a defeat for them, right? So we'll have to see. Okay. Yes, but attention is not being as much. There's not much attention paid to them, Doug. So they can at least make it appear as though that it's not what's pushing them out. They can say, "Oh, agitation has stopped," even though it hasn't, because now that the media circus around the murders has ended, they can kind of lie about it. Um, Yes, HGMS, I believe that. So Tom Homan, his whole history thing, the whole thing he did historically was that he was subtle about deportations. So it's possible they're just going to become more subtle. All right. But to publicly announce that they're drawing down is a defeat, right? It is a defeat. Like to get in front of a camera and openly say, we're leaving Minnesota, uh, it is sort of a little bit of a defeat. And think about the Trump administration. They don't like admitting defeat. They don't like admitting that. They don't like drawing down. Okay, he has to say it in a way to fluff der Gruppenführer. Oh, absolutely, Inga, you're right. Okay, so this is an interesting news. Um, yeah, there you go, glutamyalgia. Okay, so okay, yeah, and you're right, Sir Bartholomew. I forgot to mention that. Sir Bartholomew says either a defeat or Walls secretly gave them what they asked for. That's my other concern here is that if it's true that local law enforcement is working with them, well, then we just have a Democratic governor who's just giving them everything they want. Okay. So if that could also be the case, right? That could also be the case. So I could be wrong, but my take on it is that to publicly admit this, regardless, is still somewhat of a defeat. Now, we could okay, we'll have to see what happens in the coming days, but this was an interesting development. I think we can all agree. Not really usual for this regime to come out and draw down on something when it's not going well for them. Okay. All right. Especially when he's screaming, it's going well, it's going well, it's going well. By the way, we're leaving. Kind of sus. All right. Okay. So there you go, guys. So Tom Homan is apparently a lot of ICE agents are leaving Minneapolis. It may be that the pressure was too much. That's Fetty Spaghetti. Fetty Spaghetti says, have you looked into reports that ICE and CBP aren't getting paid what they were promised? I wonder if they are actually losing people and are covering like this. That's very possible, Fetty. I have not read those reports. That's interesting. I'd have to look more into that. Okay. I know gluteomyalgia. Jesus. Okay. Yeah. Trump failed says there's apparently a forum where they can talk to each other, and apparently they're not getting paid. I think there might be an exodus soon if they don't get their stubs. Interesting. I did not read about that. Okay, well we'll take a look at that. Okay, so just an interesting development here. Lacroix says they tried to do a huge push in Chicago and they seemed to fail early on. Now there's Minnesota. I think they're going to reevaluate tactics and do major boots on the ground operation. Probably Lacroix. I mean, they're probably going to put resources elsewhere. Though Tom Homan is smart, and I don't mean that as a compliment. He's much better at being a subtle fascist. So he might be like, we need to get out of this city and go do subtle fascism elsewhere, so we don't cause as much of a let's put it media circus. Okay. So yeah, we'll see how it goes. Doug says they've been losing lawyers. They're polling JAG lawyers. Interesting. I didn't know that, Doug. Okay. So this is interesting, folks. So something to keep an eye on. And this kind of backs what I said, that the Trump administration still doesn't appear to have complete control over the situation. That doesn't mean they're not fascist or authoritarian, but they don't appear to have infinite amounts of power at the moment, as in they still have to deal with pushback occasionally, okay, and still have to kind of bend to it if it's enough, which means that we still have a chance to push back. Now, it needs to be stronger than protest, in my opinion, okay, but all right. It also should be noted, folks, that they have a lot of intelligence that we're not privy to. So it might be that they're getting a lot of chatter in the United States about rebellion and a lot of chatter about resistance networks popping up. And so they're like, oh shit, we've opened a can of worms. We need to calm everything down. That's also possible. Okay. Hello, Victoria. Okay. So there's that news story. An interesting development. We'll have to see where it goes. Okay.